Sanibona, ngaphambi singene kwivideo namuhla, ngithi angithathe lethuba ngibonge isupport nothando nesikhombise lona lingaphezu kokucabanga kwethu. Siyacela niqhubeke nisupporte njalo ngokubuka amavideo ethu, ungakhohlwa ukukhomenta, ushare, ulike. Siyafisa ukuzwa umbono wakho. Sicela ke singene kwivideo namuhla.
No, our schools are nonsense. Look at other kids, Colin. Already preschool, already they are crushing and they have a skill. They are acquiring a skill from a crash. Lezi ngane mayifika kwa grade 2, 3 seyikwazi ukukhanda calculator from scratch. Mayifika ko grade 5, 6, 7 seyikwazi ukukhanda imoto zikhiphe engine. This is what you need with educational system. And if you criticize this educational system yethu le better, uzoweza ama academia ifundiswa. Buka ingane zenze construction, buka zingana ningane. Buka. Already baxova cement. You understand? Giving kids skills in case ingane ingamthola umsebenzi ikwazi kuba neskill esoyingenisela imali. But here you find umuntu ono matric wenze adenze mechanics, umuntu one degree ye mechanical engineering akwazi nokuthinta imoto. Degree ye mechanical engineering, degree. La ingane ithi yofika ko grade 8 la sikwazi ukukhipha engine ikufakela ibuyisela. This is the educational system we're talking about. But unfortunately we can't critique or criticize educational system yethu ngoba kuzonabana abantu abazoloku bazoyidefenda obadefenda umbhedo. This is what we're talking about. Countries that are progressive kwenziwa kanje ezikoleni. Yabo, kwenziwa nje ezikoleni.
Njengoba sengike ngasho ngaphambilini ukuthi njengoba thina sibhizi nemadlanga commission, impilo ayimile, nezinye izinto ziyaqhubeka, neParliament okuyilona elithatha izinqumo lezi ezi-affect impilo yethu, whether negative or positive, kodwa noma iziphi izinqumo abazithathayo ziyayithinta impilo yethu, alimile. Ngikhuluma nawe nje njengoba sesikuDisemba, uyothi ekupheleni kwawo masizoqala uJanuary bese sikhuluma udaba lwama-matric. Kune-debate ke yaba khona lapha eParliament ebifike neBOSA, iBOSA ke iBill 1 South Africa lephethwe uMmusi Maimane mayelana nodaba lwe-pass rate ka-30%, ukuthi umuntu uyakwazi ukuphasa umatric eno-30% or 40% somewhere lapho. Ngithe mangiyilalela ngabona kufanele ukuthi asike sizwe ukuthi bathini labantu okuyibonisa aba-elector anaba uyibona bathatha izinqumo ngempilo zethu. Kunamaphuzu abalulekile abawashilo engifisayo ukuthi uwezwe wena njengoba kukhulunywa. Kanti uMinister we-Higher Education and Training okuwubuti Manamela ngesikhathi evele phambi kweParliament ngeviki eliphelile ukhuluma amagama abalulekile. Engicabanga ukuthi umzali wengane yenza umatric noma yona ingane yenza umatric iyadinga ukwezwa lamazwi. Cela uzwe la.
Are currently writing their national certificate exams based on trends. We anticipate that 428,000 or so of these will have a bachelor pass. And I know that in the streets, word is that once you have a bachelor pass, you therefore have access to university. We've already indicated and repeated this message that this is not the case, and that students should work harder so that their APA scores should match what the universities expect. And I know next year we would have some students flashing their bachelor's pass in our face, demanding access.
Ukubaleka kwalenkulumo esho uMinister la uzokuzwa kule debate engizokucaphulela yona. Kodwa kubalulekile la ilokho akushoyo ukuthi ama-students fanele asebenze more harder ukuze ezokwazi ukuthola ama-points a-right oyiwona azobanika i-access ukungena ema-university. Not ukuthi uphase ngebachelor. Uphasa ngebachelor kukodwa kungenzeka ukuthi uphase ngebachelor kodwa uthola ukuthi awumeet minimum requirement for i-university. Uzokuzwa ukubaleka kwayo kule nkulumo esizoba nayo. Cela ukuzwa ukuphawula kwakho la ku-comment section. ngizwe ukuthi wena ubona kanjani. Ungasisupporta-ke ngokuba imember le channel, qala ku-R40 ngenyanga ukuya phezulu. Ungasidonatela noma ngamalini onayo, khona i-account kwi-comment ephiniwe. Ungaklikha no-super thanks button. Ngiyazicelela futhi ningawaskip ama-ads. Ngiyazi-ke ukuthi kwesinye isikhathi ukuthi uyayibukela i-advert, vele kudlala i-advert eyisikhathi eside, ilinde nje isikhashana, uma ubona into inde kakhulu uyeqa. Kodwa ukubuka kwenu ama-advert, niya-contribute financially kule channel, nenza ukuthi i-YouTube kube khona esibonelela ngakho, ukuze sikwazi nathi ukuthola ama-cosmetics, sikwazi nathi ukuthola idatha lokulazi ukuthi sinethulele lezi ndaba sinethulela zona. Cela uzwe la.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson, and good morning to you and to honorable members. Honorable members, today we enter a debate about truly the future of our nation. I want to appeal to you, for all of us who are entrusted to defend our constitution, the rights of every learner, and the future of our nation. Education in and of itself has its own intrinsic value in who the learner becomes, but it also has an extrinsic value in what the learner does, what the future of work will look like, and what ultimately it tells us about what our ambition as a nation is. Our ambition must be better than where we are in terms of our term scores. It must be that we want to be global players who can influence and change the world. If we want to be that, it has to begin with how we view our education and what we do with our education. Honorable members, nations that have had incredible success in the last 30 years have done so on the back of a very strong education system. So our debate today really should not be about posturing. It should be about finding consensus. It should be about implementing meaningful reforms and making sure that yours, my children, the children of this nation have a future that will equip them to compete with anyone in the world. Our motion today really speaks to the heart of the Department of Basics Education, active decision to maintain a minimum pass mark of 30% in certain grade 12 subjects. Let me reiterate, getting 30% in all subjects in matric does not mean you've passed matric, but it does mean you are deemed proficient in that respective subject. And I want to take mathematics as an example. If we were to take young people and say we would pass them at 40%, the pass mark of last year's cohort would move from 69% to 47%. And if we did it at 50%, then it would only mean 30% of our learners are passing mathematics at 50%. Honorable members, if we did the same for science, at 30%, 75% actually pass. But at 50%, only 29% of our learners pass maths and science. Now, we could all agree the future of work will be heavily reliant on maths and science. AI and future technologies will require these as basic subjects. And in all essence, we're not preparing our young people for that future. I find it indefensible. And I would argue, honorable members, that today, if we use our speeches to be able to oppose or to certainly in any ways, just simply, I want to remind us that our parents, our young people are watching, and perhaps maybe this may be one of the most meaningful things we could do as administration. I want to say it's not only just about the pass mark. It's clearly about the structural inequalities and weaknesses that are in our education system. Let me illustrate this point, maybe by personalizing it and looking at a learner who, for this purpose, I'll call Setu. Setu's story is not dramatic. It is generally typical. This is a young South African who's born in a community where ECD centers and childhood development centers are scarce. In essence, her mother may not be able to afford a well-resourced ECD center, so they're reliant on what we do as policymakers. She may be one of 200,000 children who enter the ECD sector. Only getting 1% of our national budget. Her subsidy will be far less than what we give to a prisoner. By age of 5, Setu would have already accumulated a developmental deficit measurable in years. And when a child starts grade R behind, the system hardly does enough to help her catch up. When Setu enters primary school, she encounters the reality that characterizes far too many schools. She will likely be in a classroom of 40 to 50 learners, a teacher-to-learner ratio that is now starting to worsen. Her school is likely to be one of the 74% of the schools who do not have a library, or one of the 10,938 schools who do not have a single flushing toilet. by grade 4, honorable members, she's likely not to be able to read for meaning. And once literacy is lost, every subject's become harder, mathematics becomes decoding, not reasoning, science becomes memorization. And then from grade 7 onwards, the system continues to move her through grades without her actually having mastered the basics. By the time she gets to matric, honorable members, she might be able to achieve the 30 or 40% required for her to pass. But the system will assess her differently. She may not be placed in a TVET college. She may not go to higher education. Universities will assess her differently, and employers will ultimately deem her unemployable. This is the story, not dramatic, but very typical. So I would urge honorable members, as we enter this debate today, ending the 30% pass mark is not the only standalone reform. It signals the seriousness that we will hold about standards. It must be accompanied by comprehensive system-wide changes, as the motion suggests. We must remove this lower threshold if we're going to address the weaknesses beneath it. And I would argue that today we could make that very profound start. Her expectation that a matric student who has participated in an academic program should know at least half of the content is reasonable, considering that 12 years of continuous learning has already taken place. So I urge us, honorable members, let us move the pass mark from 30 to 50% progressively. And therefore, when this motion tables, that the Minister of Basic Education can table reforms that ensure that every learner, say too, as one of the South Africans, can be able to compete with anyone else in this world. I urge you to support this motion, honorable members. I thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Letsia.
Chairperson, I hope I'm audible.
You are audible, Honourable Member, and you may proceed.
Thank you very much. December is a critical period both globally and within our own country as we commemorate the 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children. Allow me to utilize this solemn moment upon all men across the length and breadth of our nation to rise as champions in the fight against gender-based violence and child abuse. This growing scourge continues to undermine the very fabric of our society. It is a profoundly damaging impact on the basic education sector, where the safety, dignity, and holistic development of our learners must remain paramount. It is therefore incumbent upon us, particularly men, to become active agents of change, to confront harmful norms, and to build a future grounded in respect, equality, and justice. As Chairperson, the continuous improvement of our education system is our collective responsibility. Education is a critical developmental instrument that must assist us to grapple with the legacies of colonialism of a special type, towards breaking the chains of poverty, reducing inequality, and expanding opportunities of self-development and upwards mobility for all, regardless of race, class, and socioeconomic context. I want to place this on record, that we cannot grow public confidence in our education system without being honest about performance. We must dispel the persistent and misleading narrative regarding the National Senior Certificate pass requirement. Let it be stated unambiguously that 30% is not a pass mark in the curriculum of education. A candidate who attains an overall aggregate of 30% across the subject written will not meet the minimum requirement for a pass. There are established subject-specific thresholds and promotional criteria that must be satisfied, and an aggregate of 30% falls far short of these standards. There can be no ambiguity on this matter. The NSC pass requirement are as follows. For a bachelor pass requirement, a candidate must obtain at least 40% for the candidate's home language, and this is compulsory. Anything less than 40%, this candidate will not achieve a bachelor pass. They must also at least get 50% for the candidate's 4 other subjects, excluding life orientation. They must obtain at least 30% for the language of learning and teaching of that higher education institution. They must obtain at least 30% for 1 other subject, and they must pass at least 6 of the 7 subjects. The second one is a diploma pass requirement. They must also at least get 40% for the candidate's home language, which is compulsory, must obtain 7, or must obtain at least 40% for 3 other subjects, excluding life orientation, must get at least 30% for the language of learning and teaching of higher education institution. They must at least obtain 30% for 1 other subject and pass at least 6 of the 7 subjects. As certificate pass requirements, the candidates must obtain 40% for the candidate's home language, which is also compulsory, must at least get 30% for the language of learning and teaching of the higher education institution, must obtain at least 40% for the 2 other subjects, must obtain at least 30% for 3 other subjects, and must pass at least 6 of the 7 subjects. Therefore, honorable members, it is evident that each NSC level has its own set of subject combination and minimum percentage marks. The 30% requirement applies only to specific subjects for passing matric. The idea that learner can get 30% in all subjects and pass matric is incorrect, it's false, it's fallacy. We must stress this point to ensure understanding and dispel misconceptions that undermine our education system. House Chairperson, we live in a diverse and ever-evolving society. Our education system cannot be reduced to a single percentage, but must be engaged within a nuanced manner that appreciates its historical and present realities. It must equip our learners to meaningfully contribute to all sectors of the society. As such, differentiated pass requirements ensure that learners are assessed on their different capacities and prepared for diverse pathways, as demonstrated in the 3-stream model of academic, vocational, and occupational training. The effectiveness of our education will continue to be undermined if we do not urgently tackle the structural inequalities that still plague our education system. We must swiftly resolve the unevenness in the teacher training, resource disparities between school, infrastructure backlogs, and curriculum inconsistencies, all of which shapes learners' performances. Notwithstanding these challenges, we must continue to build on our strides. We must continue to build on strides of our NSC that the NSC has made towards global recognition. With our qualification benchmarked against international standard, we take pride in the fact that the caliber of learners produced in this education system in South Africa is capable of competing and succeeding in higher education institutions across the world in various fields, such as medicine and engineering. Honorable Chairperson, the ANC remains steadfast in advancing the aspiration of the Freedom Charter, adopted 70 years ago in 1955 in Cape Town, which boldly declared that the doors of learning and culture shall be open to all. As the ANC-led government will continue to give life to this historic mandate by expanding access, strengthening equity, and ensuring that every child, regardless of their educational circumstances, has the opportunity to realize their full potential through quality education. Therefore, any reforms to the NSC minimum pass requirement cannot be divorced from broader social transformation objective, both as constitutional obligation enshrined in Section 29 and as a historical duty committed to advancing the national democratic revolution. Thank you very much, House Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Kubane.
Honourable Chair, let me put this back. House Chairperson, honourable members and South Africans at large, the debate on reforming the National Senior Certificate pass requirements centers on national educational standards, student preparedness for higher education and the workforce, socio-economic factors and equity across the school. The National Senior Certificate, NSC, is a critical qualification in South Africa, serving as a gateway to higher education and employment. Currently, the minimum...
Honorable Ngubane, may I request you to switch off your video, because the feed from your side is not, the connection is not stable. Okay. So maybe if you switch it off, it will be better.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
Currently, the minimum pass requirements for the NSCs are set at 30% for most subjects and 40% for others, sparking public debate about whether these thresholds are too low. Today, we'll explore both sides of the argument. Should South Africa reform the policy on NSC minimum pass requirements? The current policy sets low expectations and fails to equip learners with the necessary skills for post-school success. It generally lowers the South African quality standard of education, global competitiveness. Schools across the globe yearly compete in high school mathematics, science, biology, English, and other high school critical subjects. South Africa on its own volition, chooses not to participate in these competitions to measure its global standards of education. A 30 or 40% pass mark in a subject is not a true measure of a student's ability to cope with the rigors of PSET university or TVET college education, leading to high dropout rates in higher education institutions. One thing we do not do in the universities as a measure, we do not measure the students, the caliber of students, the classification of students who are in maths, who are doing science degrees, actuarial degrees, and those that are doing administrative degrees, that's like PA, Bachelor of Social Science Administration. We need to start to have that measurement on university so that we can get a true reflection of what students are we producing at a 30%, because most students who are producing at a 30% are not doing high-end degrees, but are doing low-end degrees. Raising the standards would increase the perceived and actual value of the NSC qualification, both nationally and internationally, ensuring South African learners are competitive in a global context. Implementing stricter requirements would encourage a better teaching and lecture and learning culture, driving students to strive for greater mastery of the curriculum, e.g. aiming for 50% or higher, rather than just meeting a low minimum threshold. Raising the bar would force the education system to address underlying quality issues, such as teacher training, early childhood development, and curriculum delivery, rather than using low pass mark to artificially inflate overall pass rate. The current minimum pass marks of 30 and 40% are too low and fail to ensure students have mastered necessary skills and knowledge. Raising these pass requirements would encourage higher academic standards and better prepare students for post-school qualification and labor market. There is another element of global competitiveness. South Africa's education systems lags behind other middle-income countries in terms of tertiary enrollment and attainment rates. Higher pass rates requirements will align the NSCs with international standards, improving the country's global competitiveness. Universities and employers often require higher marks than the NSC minimum thresholds. Reforming the policy would ensure that students meet these expectations and reduce mismatches between education and labor market needs. On the equity and accountability, raising the pass marks requirements will push schools to improve teaching quality, provide better support to students, especially in under-resourced schools. It will also ensure what the NSC remains a credible qualification valued by higher education institutions and employers. There are things that we need to solve in the NSC performance, the inequalities, socioeconomic disparities. Students from wealthier schools, quintiles 5, consistently outperform those from poor schools, quintiles 1 to 3. However, the achievement gap in NSC pass rate between quintile 1 and quintile 5 schools has narrowed significantly over time from 48% points in 2008 to just 10% points in 2023. Despite this progress, poorer schools still face challenges such as limited resources, overcrowded classrooms, and less qualified teachers, which hinder their students' performance. Quintiles 1 to 3 schools have historically contributed fewer higher level passes in critical subjects like mathematics and physical science. However, their share of high level passes has improved over time, rising from 27% in 2008 to 50% in 2023 on mathematics. Gender dynamics. Historically, male candidates outperformed female candidates in NSC pass rates, but these gaps narrowed during the pandemic years. By 2023, female candidates were outperforming male candidates in bachelor pass rates, indicating a shift in gender inequalities. The unintended consequences, higher pass requirements could lead increased dropout rate as students will struggle academically, may feel discouraged and leave prematurely. Either way, the Statistics South Africa latest has revealed that that need keeps on increasing year by year, even on the current lowering of the 30 to 40 pass mark policy. Many outside factors like economy, rejuvenation, and employment must be the focus of the day to reduce the need. So the need is not a measure that we can say we are doing well in our pass rate currently. In summary, while inequalities in NSC performance have declined over time, systemic disparities in resources and opportunities continue to affect outcomes, particularly in poorer schools. Addressing these inequalities is crucial for ensuring equitable access to quality education and improving overall NSC performance. We need to desist from just percentagizing the pass rate of our students. We need to look at the actual socioeconomic factors that contribute to this lowering of the pass rate. It is the quintile 1 to 3 that is affected most by this reducing of the pass rate mark. So we need to focus on mostly the poorest of the poorest by putting all our resources, all our mechanisms to these poor schools, but not reducing the pass rate, improving resource allocation to the poorest school, improving the socioeconomic outlook in the poorer schools, improving the teacher training in these poorer schools. All our resources need to divert to the poor schools so that we make sure that we up the numbers of the pass rate. As MK Party will focus all our resources to reduce socioeconomic factors that keeps producing quintile 1 to 3 schools in order to level the playing ground. We will channel resources from the rich schools to the poor schools. We will develop and focus our energy on pro-poor schools. So, Chair, in that manner, I conclude my debate that we need to focus on poor schools and stop percentagizing our poor kids as if they are lesser than the others, but make sure that we empower them and give them resources and tutor support so that as well they pass with 50% and not celebrate the higher pass rate that is higher because we've lowered the percentage of pass rate to 30%. But we need to celebrate the genuineness of 50 plus 1% pass rate of our students by equipping them. Thank you very much, Chairperson, for this debate. MK appreciates the debate that has been proposed by Mr. Moimane. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Minister of Basic Education.
Honourable Chairperson, honourable members, I welcome this opportunity to engage in this important discussion about our standards in our basic education system, specifically the proposal to end the so-called 30% pass mark. This debate resurfaces frequently, and it is essential to the public and to parents and to teachers and learners to hear the facts clearly without distortion. At the heart of this discussion is a shared national concern, whether our education system is equipping young people with the knowledge and skills they need to thrive, and whether the standards we set reflect the ambitions we hold for our country. On this, honourable members, there is no disagreement. We all want to achieve higher standards, stronger outcomes, and a system that is fit for purpose in a competitive global economy. However, raising standards is not achieved by slogans, nor by misrepresenting policy, nor by imagining that the complex work of curriculum assessment, teacher development, infrastructure, and early learning can be reduced to a single number. Raising standards requires evidence, reform, and sustained coordinated action across the system. Members, let me start by restating the facts already placed on record in Parliament. There's no such a thing as a 30% overall pass mark in the National Senior Certificate. Learners do not obtain a matric certificate by achieving 30%. To simply pass the NSC, a learner must meet a three-tiered set of subject requirements, including at least 40% in home language, at least 40% in 2 further subjects, and at least 30% in 3 additional subjects. Higher thresholds apply for obtaining admission to a diploma and bachelor studies. This structure is long-standing, internationally aligned, and reflects the NSC's nature as a multi-subject qualification rather than a single exam system. More importantly, and this is where I want to draw the members' attention, the minimum threshold is not the norm. Out of the 724,000 learners who wrote the NSC last year, only 189 passed with this minimum subject combination requirement. That is just 0.003% of the overall numbers. The fact is this: the majority of our learners who pass the NSC either obtain admission to diploma or bachelor studies. To claim that learners pass matric with 30% is therefore not supported by evidence. It is a misunderstanding and perhaps a distortion of how the NSC works, and it must be corrected so that the public debate rests on facts rather than rhetoric. By correcting this misconception is only the beginning. The far more important question here, Chair, is how do we raise standards meaningfully throughout the system? How do we ensure that more learners excel in gateway subjects and achieve more bachelor passes, and that all young people leave the system with a meaningful opportunity or qualification? Members, raising standards will not be achieved by adjusting one number in grade 12. Real and sustainable improvement depends on strengthening the entire architecture of basic education: curriculum, assessment, teacher development, school resources, and most critically, foundational learning. And that is why one of the major reforms of this administration has to be setting up the National Education and Training Council, South Africa's very first national advisory body focused specifically on school education. This council is an institutional reform, not a political response. Its mandate is to provide independent, expert, evidence-informed advice on the key drivers of quality. I have tasked the Council with reviewing South Africa's current assessment progression and promotion requirements across grades R to 12 and advising whether they remain appropriate, equitable, and aligned with international best practice. This includes analyzing existing legislation, studying comparative systems, assessing implications for pedagogy, and proposing reforms grounded in evidence. The Council is also advising me on strengthening foundational learning and identifying a minimum package of support required to improve early grade literacy and numeracy. This work goes to the heart of our national challenge. If a child cannot read for meaning by grade 4, their chances of succeeding in later grades diminish sharply. Performance in math, science, and other gateway subjects, and ultimately in matric, rests on the strength of early foundations. This is why expanding access to early childhood care and education, improving the teaching and learning of early literacy and numeracy, and supporting educators with better materials and training is central to the priorities of this administration. Honourable members, raising the matric pass mark cannot solve what is fundamentally a foundational learning challenge. The department is also strengthening the system's capacity to provide diverse learner pathways. In partnership with DHEAD, we are improving learner tracking from grade 12, we're expanding access to schools of skill, we are strengthening technical and vocational offering, and enhancing articulation into TVET colleges. Our goal is to ensure that every learner leaves the system with meaningful skill, qualification, or opportunity. This is particularly important because actually the biggest dropout point is not matric. It is grade 10 and 11, where many learners who have not acquired a strong foundation struggle to progress. And so simply raising the NSC pass threshold without addressing the root causes of poor performance earlier in the system would just push more learners out and deepen inequality. Raising standards cannot mean raising barriers. It must mean raising support. The credibility of the NSC remains intact and internationally recognized. Umalusi's rigorous quality assurance processes, moderating papers, verifying school-based assessments, auditing marking, and certifying results to ensure that the NSC meets global standards every year. Each examination cycle is an immense national undertaking involving thousands of markers, moderators, monitors, and officials. And I want to express my appreciation to all our partners across the province who have done this work. To the class of 2025 who have concluded their exams this week, well done. You have demonstrated resilience and commitment, and I also acknowledge the families and communities who supported these learners throughout the year. Members, we cannot talk about raising standards without speaking frankly about what is actually the most urgent issue facing our education system. The fact that 8 out of 10 10-year-olds in South Africa cannot read for meaning. This is the national emergency. If children cannot read, they cannot learn. If they cannot learn, they cannot progress. If they cannot progress, they cannot build a future for themselves or contribute fully to an economy. This is why foundational learning, including ECD, and teaching of literacy and numeracy in grades R to 3 is at the center of what is a real reform agenda. When we strengthen the early years, we transform the trajectory of every year that follows. We improve performance in high school. We increase bachelor passes. We enhance participation in maths and science. We expand the life chances of young people across the country. Raising the matric pass rate will not address the foundational learning crisis. It will not improve reading fluency in grade 3, nor strengthen early mathematics, nor improve teaching quality, nor reduce dropout rates. What will raise standards is sustained commitment to evidence-based reforms, better teaching support, stronger early learning programs, coherent assessment policies, safe and well-resourced schools, and pathways that recognize the diverse strengths and aspirations of our young people.
Honourable Minister, your time is now expired. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honourable Shikwambana.
Thank you, House Chair. Honorable members, when a nation lowers the bar for its children, it's not raising their chances, it is burying their potential. 30 years into democracy, government continues to tell the black child that 30% pass mark is enough. The percentage is not enough. It will never be enough for a country that claims to want transformation and for a generation that must compete in a global knowledge-based economy. Let us speak honestly. A child who passes with 30% will not become an engineer. That child will not become a pilot, a doctor, an auditor, a metallurgist, an accountant, or an IT specialist. These are the professions that build nations. These are the sectors where innovations happen. These are the spaces still dominated by the minority, not because black children are incapable, but because the system designed for them has been weakened, diluted, and continuously under-resourced. We know the truth. A black child can do more and is capable of far more. Our children are not failing, they are being failed. They are failed by overcrowded classrooms, failed by the schools without libraries, laboratories, or learning tools needed to build confident thinkers, failed by teachers who themselves came through this collapsed education system, failed by a government that prefers high-pass statistics over real learning. Instead of fixing the foundation of reading, comprehension, writing, numeracy, and science exposure, the government chooses the easy option, lower the bar, celebrate the numbers, and pretend that the system is functioning. Behind behind every 30% pass is a child who will never access the profession where transformation is most urgent. That child will not be in the cockpit, not in the operating theater, not in the laboratories, not in the audit room, not in the mines as metallurgists, not in the software engineering labs, and not in the financial centers where national decisions are shaped. This means we are quietly reproducing inequality, systematically and deliberately, in the name of increasing pass rate. The EFF demands a higher standard, not because we want to punish our children, but because we believe in them more than this government has ever shown. We insist on excellence because our children are capable of excellence. We want the black child in Taung, Giyani, Engcobo, Soweto, Bushbuck Ridge, Mamelodi, and Seychelles to access the sectors that have been monopolized for decades so they can compete locally, thrive globally, and break the cycles of exclusion once and for all. A nation that wants excellence must invest in excellence. Excellence begins with belief. It begins with the conviction that the black child deserves nothing less than a world-class education and a meaningful chance of at life. In closing, the 30% must be scrapped as the basis of a pass mark in this country. It is misleading, it is harmful, and it is collapsing the future of our children. We therefore demand that the government introduce a 50% pass mark as the new national standard. Rise the bar, rise the expectation, and rise the future. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Mati.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The IFP welcomes this debate because it goes to the heart of a problem we have raised times without number. We cannot build a prosperous nation while we continue telling our learners that 30% is an acceptable standard. When we tell our learners that 30% is enough to pass, we are ignoring 70% of their potential. Education must be above equipment our children to achieve their full potential and not embracing mediocrity as normal. We have said it before and we will say it again. 30% metric pass mark creates a false sense of achievement. It lowers expectations, and once expectations are lowered, performance low follows. A child who is told that 30% is good enough is being prepared for disappointment, not for success, as this is unfair, especially to learners in schools that already face severe socio-economic challenges. The IFP has consistently called for the minimum pass mark to be raised to 50%. Raising the pass mark is not about punishing learners. It is an investment for their future. It is also about honesty. A learner who achieves 30% is not ready for the demands of higher education or the modern workforce, and we cannot continue pretending otherwise. When standards are low, we get comfortable with the mediocrity, but it's way to set the standard high. Our children will be emboldened to strive for better. However, raising standards cannot happen in isolation. It must be meshed with an education system capable of supporting learners to reach those standards. We cannot ignore the systematic challenges that continue to hold our learners back, particularly in townships and rural areas. Thousands of qualified teachers remain unemployed. Most schools have no libraries, and many learners still attend schools under inhuman conditions. This is why the IFP believes that any shift in the pass mark policy must be accompanied by a well-resourced program improved to entire learning environment. This should include strengthening teacher support, improving learner materials, and ensuring that curriculum delivery is monitored consistently. Setting a higher benchmark must go hand in hand with ensuring that every school, regardless of the location, has the capacity to help learners reach it. Therefore, the IFP supports this resolution because South Africa deserves an education system that prepares its young people not for survival, but for success. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Hendricks.
Honourable Chair, Honourable Members, fellow citizens, the Patriotic Alliance welcomes this debate brought on by Mr. Honourable Vusima Imani. The Patriotic Alliance, I stand before you today on behalf of the Patriotic Alliance, not merely to critique this policy, but to sound a clarion call for the restoration of intellectual rigor and future-ready competitiveness in our nation's basic education system. The issue at hand is the 30% pass mark for the National Senior Certificate, which, while intended to boost student graduation rates, has negatively impacted the quality of our education and future opportunities for our students. This low benchmark fails to set a meaningful standard of achievement, reflecting an acceptance of mediocrity in our education. The low 30% pass mark creates an unhealthy incentive, and students realize they can advance with minimal effort. This reduction in expectations lower ambition in classrooms and instill the troubling belief that mediocrity is acceptable. The education system focus on low passing standards has left students unprepared for the demand of tertiary institutions and modern industries. As a result, many first-year university students face challenges leading to high dropout rates and negative impact on their self-esteem and financial stability. The Patriotic Alliance advocates for a significant intervention to raise the official pass mark, aiming to set a higher standard of competency. We propose a consultative process to enhance the quality of teaching, inspire better learning, and ensure that graduates have the skill necessary for success after school. Let us be clear, this is not about excluding learners. It's about including them in a future of genuine opportunities. It is about replacing a culture of minimal compliance with a culture of excellence. By raising standards, we are not raising the barrier to success. We are raising the floor of their potential. And I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Bosov.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. If a country has a high rate of participation and success in the education system, but limited success in the job market, it means something is wrong. So what is wrong with South African education? The answer is many things. In the first place, the National Senior Certificate is not designed for employment. It is designed to prepare learners for further study, yet, for the vast majority of matriculants, it is all they have to enter the job market. From an employment perspective, it is better to leave school after grade 9 and do a vocational qualification at the TVET college than to complete matric as the highest qualification. Yet, popular perception regards such a decision as second best. A common, unhelpful criticism is to calculate the real matric pass rate by only comparing the number of grade 1s in a specific year and compare to the matrics 12 years later. It is offensive to count learners who left school after grade 9 for vocational training as failures of the school system. But worse than offensive, it is harmful. Why are there so many high schools and so few TVET colleges? It is in part the stigma, but also the reality of available teachers and equipment. If you teach geography or history, you only need a teacher in the classroom. Vocational training requires a simulated workplace and a lecturer, whose knowledge and skills often command better compensation outside of education. Even school subjects with a direct employment advantage, like hospitality studies or agricultural technology, don't get taught at schools where it could really make a difference, but at the others where it might be less important. There are more problems. The progression policy determines that the learner cannot spend more than 4 years in a phase. It is good not to have 17-year-olds in grade 7, but it also means that learners are progressed when they should actually repeat the year. Currently, teachers are organized in trade unions with a culture of workplace contestation. More appropriate is a professional association where members impose the highest standards on themselves. and now the 30% pass rate. That is a popular work of fiction, creating a way to score political points without addressing the actual, very complicated problem. The result is the reality is, if you get 30%, you fail the subject. Yet, you may still receive a National Senior Certificate provided the failed subject is neither language nor mathematics or mathematic literacy, and the mark is not below 30%. Also, a Senior Certificate with a bachelor's, diploma or certificate pass rate are three vastly different things with different access. A distinction remains a distinction. We need to discuss these things informed and reasonable, and desist from allegation which undermine our credibility. To allege that South Africa has a pass rate of 30% is an effective one-liner, and it seems to explain everything that is wrong. But it is not. Listening to the speech of Dr. Maimane and to the proposed resolution, I will admit that his argument has more to it than the one-liner and can be supported. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Ngobeni.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. House Chair, this is indeed a very timely debate that requires us to be politically honest. Unfortunately, the powers that be choose otherwise, as we have just heard from the previous speaker as well as the minister's debate. And so before we go any further, House Chair, we must guard against getting lost in semantics. Let us not shroud this moment in technicalities. South Africans know the truth. The 30% pass mark rhetoric is not a myth. It is not a distortion. It is not opposition theatrics. It is a lived reality. And anyone who pretends otherwise does so to confuse the nation rather than to confront the crisis that is before us. Chairperson, 30 years into our democracy, South Africa must face the painful truth that our education system stands as the single greatest failure of the post-apartheid project. It is not a small administrative weakness, it is a profound injustice, a betrayal of the promise that freedom would open the doors of learning and opportunity to every child. We entered democracy believing equality would finally take root. Yet today, a child's future is still determined by the circumstances of their birth and the dysfunction of the school they are allocated to. There is no clearer injustice than an education system that robs a child of their potential before they even discover it. This crisis did not emerge by accident. It is the result of deliberate political choices, lowering standards instead of elevating them, celebrating pass rates instead of real learning, protecting political interests instead of protecting children, and choosing comfort over courage. This is how a 30% pass mark became acceptable. This is how illiteracy in the foundation phase became normal. This is how teachers were left unsupported, principals unaccountable, and children abandoned in a system meant to uplift them. Today, half of the learners who begin grade 1 do not reach matric. Most grade 4 learners cannot read for meaning, and our economy is starved of artisans, engineers, and skilled workers because the system that should produce them is collapsing. This is not transformation. This is not empowerment. It is a national injustice repeated every single year. Honorable Chair and members, South Africa deserves far, far better. We deserve an education system that restores dignity, unlocks talent, and builds a modern competitive economy. We must stand firmly for a future where every child masters reading and numeracy in early years, where high standards are non-negotiable, where principals and schools are held fully accountable through transparent performance measures, where teachers are trained, respected, and treated as nation builders, where learners choose their future, academic or vocational, without shame or limited opportunity, and where every school is a place of safety, dignity, and aspiration. A child who receives poor education is not free. A nation that denies opportunity is not just, and a government that normalizes mediocrity cannot claim to be transforming this country. Honorable House Chairperson, the failure of post-apartheid education is a wound carried by millions, but this moment can be a turning point if we choose honesty over comfort, competency over mediocrity, and courage over political correctness. If the GNU chooses excuses and blurred numbers, then South Africans must choose excellence, ambition, and accountability. Action SA supports the merits of this debate because refusing to do so would signal a lack of belief in our youth and, by extension, in the future of our nation. South Africa will rise only when the education system rises as well. I thank you, Honorable House Chairperson and members.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Reverend KRJ Meshu.
Thank you, Chairperson. The ACDP welcomes this very important debate on Dr. Maimani's resolution to end the 30% matric pass mark and raise standards in basic education. Our learners must be able to read with meaning and confidence from the youngest age possible, which is not the case at present. For too long, South Africa has tolerated failure as disguised as success. Our matric pass mark, be it 30% or 40%, does not prepare learners for tertiary education or the workplace. It is a false comfort that masks systematic failure. As the Department of Basic Education itself acknowledged, I quote, any potential changes to pass requirements or curriculum structure must be evidence-based, internationally benchmarked, and aligned with South Africa's developmental needs. The ACDP has always argued that education must be a ladder out of poverty, not a trapdoor into unemployment. Public debate has intensified with the 30% threshold called a meager pass mark that hurts our pupils. Social media has echoed this frustration, demanding decisive action. Cambridge O-levels, still run internationally, have long succeeded in countries such as Singapore, Mauritius, Pakistan, and Zimbabwe. As academic Martin Pugh observed, Zimbabwe's school system has outperformed South Africa's despite spending far less per learner amidst a decade of economic chaos. If our general education and training certificate were upgraded to carry more esteem in the labor market, a young people leaving school at grade 9 would have genuine pathways into apprenticeship, entry-level jobs, and vocational training, reducing the scourge of youth unemployment while restoring dignity to non-academic learners, ensuring that their efforts are recognized rather than dismissed as inadequate to school. The ACDP supports this resolution and thank Mr. Maimani for it. We call on this House to embrace a culture of achievement, especially in maths and science, where every learner reaches their God-given potential and education becomes the cornerstone of a national renewal. Lastly, raising standards with proper support for teachers and learners will send a clear message to the public and internationally that South Africa values education. I thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Nontenja.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. House Chair, since the dawn of democracy, government has made significant legislative reforms in expanding access and creating equality in education, particularly for the underprivileged South Africans. However, the country's educational system is suggestively falling far behind the rest of the world's overall quality, and this 30% mark worsens the situation. The 30% pass mark sends the wrong message to learners, parents, and society. It tells our children that minimum effort is enough when the modern world requires high-level literacy, numeracy, and critical thinking skills. Employers already report that many matriculants lack basic competencies and universities struggle with underprepared students. 30% pass mark limits learners from qualifying for higher education admission due to non-competitive credentials, and it contradicts one of the department's core objectives, which is committing to quality. South Africa's education crisis demands urgent action. Raising the standards by ending the 30% mark is not about punishing learners, but about protecting their futures. We need stronger foundations in reading, maths, and science, more teacher support and accountability in schools. A higher pass mark requirement will encourage better teaching, better learning, and ultimately a more competitive workforce. If we maintain low expectations, we guarantee low outcomes. South Africa deserves a system that builds excellence, not just survival. Keeping standards low traps learners in a cycle of mediocrity. If we wait for a perfect system, we will wait forever. Setting higher standards can be a catalyst for system improvement. It creates agency, demands accountability, and motivates investment. Excellence must start somewhere. The UTM supports this motion.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Ghani.
Thank you very much, Nakens. I'm Samuel Tolu. Let's remind ourselves, honourable members, on why we send our children to school. We do so because we want them to learn, to grow, and to become better human beings. We want them to become productive citizens who will contribute to the growth and development of our country and the world. For many years, we have debated the question of pass marks. What percentage is acceptable? What minimum requirement is fair? And what threshold defines success? But I want to ask today, are we becoming pass mark sensitive in the same way that consumers are price sensitive? Are we obsessing over a number instead of the quality of learning behind it? The danger of this obsession is clear. If we focus only on raising the pass rates, we may be tempted to lower the standards, to reduce the level of difficulty in the same way that companies shrink the size of a product but keep the price the same. The unintended consequence is that we risk producing learners who hold certificates but lack competencies, young people whose potential has been compromised in the pursuit of statistical victories. The obsession we should all agree on is that of quality. We must focus on helping our children become the best versions of themselves, and this cannot happen by chance. It requires deliberate and consistent investment. It begins with strong teacher development because no education system can rise above the quality of its teachers. It requires leadership development for principals because a school thrives or breaks down under its leadership. It demands a safe, well-resourced, and conducive environment for learning and teaching. All of us in this house are products of an education system. We stand here today because at some point, a teacher, a community, or a school helped shape our path. We must look honestly at what worked, strengthen it, and replicate it across more schools and more communities. The resolution before us is not controversial. It is reasonable and worthy of support, but more importantly, it is a reminder that our national obsession should be with quality, with ensuring that every child reaches their full potential. Honorable members, let us commit ourselves to building an education system that does not just pass children, but prepares them for life. A system that does not just measure results, but builds character, competence, and confidence. That is the future our children deserve, and it is the standard we must insist on.
So thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Schlazo Webster.
Thank you very much, House Chair. In her remarks, the Minister referred to minimum standards as one number. Honorable Teboholete of the ANC said the education system cannot be reduced to a single percentage. And so I want to paint a picture of what it can certainly be reduced to. The young woman who comes and becomes the first to finish matric in her family, only to discover that she cannot access university or complete a TVET qualification. The young man who passes but cannot enter apprenticeship pathways because his marks close doors instead of opening them. It's the mother who celebrates a pass, not knowing that the system has already limited her child's future before it has even begun, and those are the young people who need us today. The Honourable Minister outlined the technical design of the National Senior Certificate, the weighting, assessment structure, and I appreciate the clarity with which the Minister always engages the House on those issues and those technicalities. But I want to also remove any confusion. At no point have we argued that the aggregate pass mark is 30%. That is not in the draft resolution. It is not our position as Build One South Africa and has never been. Our concern is straightforward. The policy still allows 3 individual subjects to be passed at 30%, and we believe that no subject should be deemed as a pass at 30%. Secondly, after the technical explanations, we have to return to the lived reality of the children and the parents that we serve. Because while the system may be complex, the outcomes are painfully simple. A learner can pass matric with 3 subjects at 30% and 3 at 40%, and even with that pass, they may not meaningfully access the next stage of life. Only a small fraction of learners who pass matric actually qualify for university. That is a fact. And of those, fewer than 15% make it through to graduation. For TVET colleges, which are the backbone of our skills economy, the throughput is equally low. Many learners enter, but most don't complete because the academic foundations are too weak from the start. I want to say this as I close. There is not a single parent in this house who would accept a 30% or 40% for their own house. Not because we're harsh, but because we know what that means for the future, what that mark would mean even as a subject for the future. Yet somehow, as a nation and as leaders in a nation, we've come to accept that for South Africa's children, something that none of us would accept in our own homes for our children. And that's a moral contradiction. Minister, I know your commitment to education and I know it's sincere. And because of that, I extend this invitation to you. This isn't about access or quality. We want both for our children. So let's raise the standard together. Let's align our technical frameworks with real demands of universities, TVET colleges, and the labor markets. And let's send a message to our young people that we don't expect less of them. We believe they can achieve more. I thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honourable Gabo.
I'm here from the ATM, Chair.
Yes, Honourable Zungula, I did not receive an indication that you will be speaking on this topic, but you may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Despite our country having a 46% youth unemployment rate, we've been telling our youth that they work hard, get education, they will succeed. But the truth is, we are educating our children for jobs that do not exist, while ignoring the industries that actually build nations. South Africa's economy is rooted in mineral resources, mining, agriculture, energy, and industrial production. Yet our education system is rooted in theory, paperwork, and outdated colonial design. And then we pretend to be shocked when millions of young people cannot find work. The problem is not the youth. The problem is in the curriculum that betrays them. The country sits on the richest mineral deposits on earth: platinum, chrome, manganese, rare earth minerals. The entire world needs needs for the green economy. Yet in most schools, a child will never learn how minerals are extracted, how beneficiation works, how industrial processes create value, how mining can be done responsibly. Instead, we export raw minerals and import finished products 10 times the price because we refuse to educate our people the process to own their own resources. We do not have an education system that teaches irrigation, agri-processing, soil science, livestock management, or modern farming technology. We import food we should be producing. We let farmland lie idle while unemployment rises. We separate education from the economy, and that act confused when the economy collapses. We shut down technical schools. We starve artisan training. We killed off industrial colleges. And now we cry about infrastructure failure, manufacturing decline, load shedding, broken machinery, and companies that cannot find local skills. We created that crisis, and we can fix it by only rebuilding technical and vocational education at a scale. Why do we have degrees with no economic purpose? Why do we have schools with no science labs? Why do we have universities pumping out graduates who are already fighting, or ready for nothing the country actually needs? Because a misaligned education keeps South Africa dependent on imported food, dependent on foreign engineers, dependent on multinational corporations that take our minerals and return finished products with a 400% markup. Dependency is profitable, just not for us. We need an education system that trains mining engineers in mining towns, trains agricultural scientists in rural provinces, trains artisans in modern, well-funded technical colleges, prioritizes beneficiation, manufacturing, robotics, and renewable energy, links every school and university to the sector driving the real economy. This is how we build sovereignty.
Remember, your time is now expired. Thank you.
Sibambela le video. Kuningi kakhulu okukhulunyiwe. Ingakho ngifisa ukuzwa ukuphawula kwakho. Kodwa ke lana bekukhulunywa ngekusasa lezwe lethu njenge-South Africa. Maningi kakhulu amaphuzu aveziwe. Kunephuzu elishiwo usisi weBOSA engilithandayo. Uthi akekho noyedwa kulabantu abakhona la eParliament abadebatayo ofuna umntwana wakhe aphase ngo-30% umatric. Akhona oyedwa ngo-40%. That is the reason why abantwana babo bengafundi ezikoleni zasemalokishini nasezikoleni zasemakhaya. Befunde ezikoleni zomntakabani. Ngoba bayaqonda ukubaluleka kwemfundo. Ukuthi basiza kuphi in terms of abantu ikusasa labo libe right, liqhakaze. Libalekile leli phuzu. Phuzu elinye futhi engizwile lisho uMinister uSive Gwagube elithi ukulungisa kumatric angeke kusize ngoba umntwana ka grade 4 can't read for meaning. Problem leyo esinayo. If umntwana ka grade 4 akakwazi ukufunda athathe article ayifunda understand ukuthi isho ukuthini. Inkinga leyo efuneka ixazululeke. Futhi umuntu wenza grade 4 akwazi ukufunda. That is the reason why kubantu abamnyama bengekho baningi abantu abafunda incwadi. Ngoba lento iyafakwa khule nayo. Mawubuka izitori zabelungu kukhona bedtime stories. Ulwazi oluningi mawufuna ukulazi liseyincwadini. Ulwazi nje oluningi luseyincwadini. Bathi mawufuna ukufihlela umuntu omnyama noma yini obhala incwadi. Izathu esenza lokho ukufunda usumdala, yebo uyafunda khona usumdala. Kodwa iningi labantu malingakujwayela ukufunda at an early age sothi lifike esigabeni sokuthi waselikhulile manje bese liyakwazi ukufunda kahle. Mangase kuthiwa ngikhuluma isilungu manje ngenza iphutha nyoba inhlekisa kubantu base South Africa ngenxa yalelo phutha bengabuka ukuthi umongo wendaba ubuthini futhi bekukhulunywa ngani, ibaluleke ngani lento bekukhulunywa ngayo. Ngiyakwazi lokho engikushoyo. Ngikubonile kwenzeka nakuyo le channel. Uma kwenzeka sifunde article bese kuba khona igama singakwazi ukulipronounce kahle. Umuntu usiyohlala kulelo gama lelo. Kodwa ke into engijabulelayo ukuthi labo bantu labo
banciphile kule channel ngoba bayabona ukuthi akusizi. Nje ngithathe leli thuba ngenze le video ngikwazisa izinto ezibalekile ezikhulunywe eParliament. Angiyibambe manje. Mina nawe bese sidibana kwivideo elandelayo. Ngiyabonga.